Good day, learners. Welcome back to class. Welcome to Biology with Omotayo. In continuation from where we stopped last class, after examining the groupings of living organisms, the concepts surrounding how the binomial nomenclature came to be, today we will now be looking at the various kingdoms. Remember last class, we looked at the hierarchical system which was invented by Carolous Linnaeus, which is made up of the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Now, kingdom, we said, has the highest variety of organisms. So we'll be taking it from there. Kingdom, from carbon line, all living organisms were classified into two basic kingdoms. Carbon line used the two system of classification for classifying all living things. And that is where we will start today. Although at present, a better system of classification have been adopted, which is the 5 system of classification. But before we get to the 5 system of classification, we will examine the first, that is the 2 system of classification, and come up with why it was abolished for another, or why another was preferred over it. So the 2 system of naming living organisms. Okay? Now, for the 2 system of naming or classifying living organisms, we have, as said by carbon line, 1 and 2. Last class, I told you that whenever you are writing the kingdoms, the first letter is to be in capital. Same for most of your groups. When you are writing the group an organism belongs to, the phylum, when you are writing the order, and so on, you use the capital letter. The only time we do otherwise is when writing the binomial nomenclature for an organism, where the first name, which is the generic name, starts with capital. The second name, which is the specific name, starts with a small letter. So, as you can see, I have written my kingdom with a capital P starting my Plantae and a capital A starting my Animalia. So, carbon line grouped all living organisms into these 2 groups. We will examine the first group. For the kingdom Plantae, he subdivided the group, okay, and brought in the following as a subdivision of this very kingdom. Okay, carbon line subgrouped or brought about the following subdivision under kingdom Plantae. That is, we have a subdivision, or what you call a phylum. Remember, last class, you were told as well, when we were looking at the hierarchical system, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. We learned from that class that when grouping plants, instead of phylum or plural, phyla, we make use of the word division or divisions. So, which simply means, under our kingdom Plantae, he came up with the following divisions. Okay, to start with, the least complex he came up with is Schizophyta, and this division contains organisms such as the bacteria. After which he went on to bring on the Talophyta, which has organisms such as the algae. Then he went on to bring in the Bryophyta, and then the pteridophyta, and lastly the spermatophyta. So this was the grouping that was brought about by Carl Linnaeus. Carl Linnaeus used the two system of classification. As I said, for like your talophyta, that's where we have the algae, the blue-green algae, Carl Linnaeus brought in organisms like the algae, the blue-green algae, and fungi under the division talophyta. Then he went on to bring in the bryophyta, the pteridophyta, and the spermatophyta. Sometimes, or probably in the course of your study, you must have come across some questions that might have required that you trace the evolutionary trend of plants from the least to the most complex. Well, going by Carl Linnaeus, that simply means progressively we are having a progressive order of complexity this way, downward, from schizophyta to talophyta to bryophyta to pteridophyta and spermatophyta. Sometimes you may have challenges pronouncing this word. It is pronounced pteridophyta. For your easy ability to spell, you may choose sometimes to call it pteridophyta. Pteridophyta. Well, all that matters is that you should make all efforts to see that you spell correctly and you capitalize where needed. Now, from here, he went on to now group all other forms of living organisms that are not really plant-like into the kingdom Animalia. So, all he has in his classification of living things were kingdom Plantae, as highlighted here, and kingdom Animalia. Now we'll be looking at why another system of classification was preferred to this. That is to say, surely there were shortfalls. So before we look at the 5 system of classification that was preferred and is now more adopted and in use, we'll look at what were the shortfalls of these 2 systems of classification. Just as said, we'll be looking at why another system was preferred. So, shortfalls of Carl Linnaeus approach. 1, no group or no kingdom can actually accommodate unicellular organisms conveniently. So, unicellular organisms were not properly placed. It was difficult placing unicellular organism in any of the group. So, unicellular organisms did not fit into any of the kingdom. Secondly, photosynthetic plants were grouped together with the non-photosynthetic plants. If you can recall, you will see that under the talophyta, we had both algae, blue-green algae, and fungi being grouped under talophyta. The non-photosynthetic plants were not differentiated from the photosynthetic plants. So that was another shortfall. Okay, and lastly, it was equally noted that he never differentiated, or the grouping never gave room for the differentiation of prokaryotes from eukaryotes. Remember, prokaryotes, organisms with a false nucleus, not well-formed nucleus. Okay, these are organisms that lack membrane-bound organelles like the mitochondria, the chloroplast, the vacuole, and so on. While for eukaryotes, these are organisms with true nucleus. They have well-formed nucleus and the cell has lots of membrane-bound organelles and so on. Thank you. Now, having seen this, you will equally agree with me that there was need for a better option. And this will now be leading us to the 5 system of grouping living organisms. So now this brings us to the 5 system of classification. The 5 system of classification was introduced by a scientist called R.H. Whittaker in the year 1969. So R.H. Whittaker introduced these 5 systems of classifying living organisms, and since its introduction it had been preferred and adopted by biologists because this system carefully differentiates prokaryotes from eukaryotes, equally made room for unicellular to be grouped into a kingdom. At the same time, this system actually made room for photosynthetic plants to be grouped separately from the non-photosynthetic plants. And so quickly, I'll be illustrating on the board a chart that will guide us with details regarding the 5 systems of classifying living organisms. Okay, the 5 system of classification as introduced by R.H. Whittaker started with Kingdom Monera. Kingdom Monera has prokaryotic organisms. Under Kingdom Monera, we have organisms that have nucleus that are not well formed or merely nuclear material. Monera has organisms that do not have membrane-bound organelles in their cell, and organisms such as the bacteria can be found under this group, that is Kingdom Monera. After this, he went on to bring in Kingdom Protoctista, also sometimes referred to as Kingdom Protista, but now more accepted to be referred to as Protoctista. Now, Kingdom Protoctista have organelles that are eukaryotic in nature. So you can see there is a differentiation with regards to the kingdom as touching the nature of cell or the nature of the nucleus of organisms that are grouped where and where. So here it simply means organisms to be grouped here are organisms with true nucleus, well-formed nucleus, organisms with membrane-bound organelles, and so on. And now, for this Protoctista, we have the ones that are animal-like. These he further grouped into a sub that is referred to as protozoa. Organisms that are animal-like under the kingdom Protoctista were further grouped into what you can refer to as a class called protozoa. While members of this kingdom that are plant-like were grouped into what can be referred to as a phylum that is called Protophyta. So, members of kingdom Protoctista that are plant-like referred to as protozoa. Members of kingdom Protoctista that are animal-like referred to as Protophyta. And for the animal-like, we have organisms such as like the trypanosome, the plasmodium, like the paramecium, the amoeba. These, among several others, were grouped under protozoa, while organisms like the euglena that are more plant-like were grouped under the Protophyta. So we've examined 2 of the 5 kingdoms. We'll be moving on to the next. We have the kingdom Fungi. Fungi are equally eukaryotes. That is to say, they also have true nucleus. However, for fungi, they are non-photosynthetic plants. Okay, they are non-photosynthetic plants. Later, when we'll be discussing each kingdom, we'll come to see other unique character that distinguishes the fungi from other groups of plants. Next, after kingdom fungi, we have, so I.H. Whittaker now brought in kingdom Plantae, and then lastly he brought in kingdom Animalia. Now, going by what is here, that is to say, I.H. Whittaker came up with a 5 system of grouping living things into kingdoms, and these kingdoms are Monera, Protoctista, Fungi, Plantae, Animalia. I repeat, Monera, Protoctista, Fungi, Plantae, Animalia. Monera, Protoctista, Fungi, Plantae, Animalia. For the last time, come with me. Let's have it again. Monera, Protoctista, Fungi, Plantae, and what? Animalia. So, a 5 kingdom concept was brought in by R.H. Whittaker in 1969. You will equally agree with me that this gives room for proper differentiation and rightful enlisting of organisms into more preferred kingdoms that carefully distinguishes them from others. So, as it is here, that is how we will be taking it. In our subsequent classes, we will start looking at each of these kingdoms. We will be starting with kingdom Monera, after which we will be taking Protoctista, Fungi, Plantae, and we'll be rounding up with the kingdom Animalia. Please don't forget Monera, Protoctista, Fungi, Plantae, Animalia. Yes, you can take the rhyme again. Keep reciting it until it sticks. Thank you. Thank you for staying this long with the class. Please, you are encouraged to endeavor to share and then get others to subscribe as well. Also, kindly always like the sessions. Thank you and do have a great day. See you next class. From the intricate working of the cells to classification of living things, from the mechanism